You know, I've known you through the art department in ISU, and I've also kept in touch with a lot of the other artists, especially the collaborator on this Goya project, Bob Erickson. When I got out of school and was unemployed, he was employed up in Stevens Point, and I went up there and lived with him. And in fact, that's where I made the drawings for Time Flies that eventually I sold in New York. So our paths also have intertwined over the years. People will ask, how did this come about, this Goya project come about? Bob and I, we just decided, you know, we need a break, so we're going to go to Spain and look at some artwork. So we're in the Prado's gift shop, and there's this book that Bob picks up and starts looking through. They're from Goya sketchbooks, and on one part of the sketchbook, you see the drawing that he made. When you turn the page on the reverse side, you see where the ink had bled through, and they made these sort of. Sometimes you could see the ghost of what was on the other side. Sometimes it was blotchy. Something like that. So Bob is looking at that and reacting to. I'm still fascinated by the drawing part, you know, because Goya is basically an illustrator, right? You know, at least these things that he's doing. But Bob's seeing it at the point of view from these shapes, these sort of anamorphic, natural shapes that are caused, and he gets this idea. And he said, you know, what happens if we just like took the reverse side and reacted to not only what we see, but also to what of Goya bleeds through, right? And I, you know, it was a brilliant idea, I thought, and a challenge. And it was at a time when a challenge like this was, okay, I'll take that. But what really fascinating me about it is Goya was making these pictures at the same time in Spain, at the same time that in France, in the Habsburg Empire, in England a little bit, certainly in the Low Countries, Rococo was blooming. So you had this, you know, I do love some of the paintings in Rococo paintings, but at the time there was a lot of fluff. You know, there was a lot of the 1% just congratulating themselves. There was a lot of talk about romance, and at the time Goya's making these drawings, and I could not help but make the parallel between what's going on now. That we have I have nothing against social media or influencers, but they do have a sense of presence that seems greater than the content that they're showing me. And that, in a lot of ways, was Boucher and Fragonard, you know? And so that parallel made some sense to me when I looked at it. Bob approached it more from, he wanted to directly collaborate with Goya. And so when you look at his work, you'll see that there's more Goya in his. In literally, it's a combination between Goya images and those images that Bob's making now in his studio. So mine was more, what can I, you know, how can I make a relationship, or how can I find a relationship, a more formal relationship between what I'm doing, and at the time I was doing way more collage, and in some ways obliterate, and you'll see that. There's one picture in there that's a rhinoceros, and people might wonder, why is this, of all the pictures, there's a rhinoceros? At the time, Candy and I have been traveling to Africa, working at a rhino orphanage in South Africa. But also, during the time of Goya, there was a famous Indian rhinoceros named Clara that was like the like you know, it was, Clara went viral, and all throughout of Europe, people brought this, or the person brought this rhinoceros, and it was a sensation. And so, although you would never know that by looking at the artwork, that's what's so great about making art, is it comes from everywhere, and when someone looks at it, they don't necessarily have to know everything about it. In fact, I would suggest, like when I went in and saw your emergent artist show, I'm not going to read any titles. I'm going to let the work do it, you know, because the titles tend to push you in some direction that perhaps the artwork fights with. So yeah, so that's a long-winded way of saying how Bob and I differ in the Goya work. And he just said, let's see if anybody wants to look at it.